Okay, hello folks. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? So let's just make sure that our audio sounds good because I've been having some weird ass problems with audio that I think I've got figured out, but you know, I'm never exactly quite sure until, let me see here. Survive. I'm going to just go to my channel. I think I'm doing okay. I think the audio is good. So if you can't hear me, um, please let me know. Right. Here we go. This is make sure that I'm looking okay. Here we go. Yeah, okay. Great. I can hear everything. So, welcome. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. Today is the 18th, September 18th. Thank you all for joining, any of you out there. And this week we're talking again about libertarians and libertarianism and why I think it sucks. And what the subject of today's stream is going to be all about the age of consent. Because that seems to be a thing that libertarians have a very wide view, wide and varying different viewpoints, most of them horrible. Um, because, quite frankly, libertarianism sucks and their philosophy sucks, and it really can't handle the idea that some forms of coercion are actually just and moral. And because of the way that libertarian philosophy has evolved over time, it's kind of become a haven for, you know, edgelords and pedophiles and pederasts who, you know, openly show up and are trying to basically integrate themselves in with libertarian philosophy, you know, because they're open to this kind of thing. And, that's the thing we talked about last time, right? Forgive me if you hear my dogs and stuff barking at people out there. Quiet! Anyway, sorry about that. Of course, they're totally ignoring me, but that's okay. They're only barking because I'm streaming, If I wasn't streaming, they'd be totally quiet. Anyway, so yeah, we kind of talked a little bit about this last time, like, you know, um, extreme philosophies attract extreme people, right? And libertarianism in general is much more forgiving of people's backgrounds and any types of problems they may have had in the past, right? So and plus they're somewhat open to, accepting people like this. Avatary Famdin, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining. So that's why you tend to get lots of, people with very funky and vile and disgusting ideas when it comes to the age of consent. They tend to gravitate towards libertarianism. And that's just, that's not just me making this observation. That's within libertarian circles itself. It's like there's this sort of epidemic of child sex apologists that are just out there. And this is, the thing is, it's like, okay, I'm not going to sit here and say all libertarians are pedophiles. That's not true. All right. Because they're not. And there is a large pushback in libertarian groups and the party itself against these kinds of people. Right. There's a very much a large pushback. You'll see if you were to do some Googles on this subject, a meme that you'll see pop up over and over again is the wood chipper meme. The idea that you know um, that pedophiles deserve to be thrown into a wood chipper, right? This is a thing that you'll find from libertarians a lot. but this also kind of, doesn't really address the fact that their ideals lend to this sort of conclusion, right? And I really think it's a flaw within libertarian ideals itself. Just the tenets that they hold clear, where it's essentially just a lot of what they think is like sort of convoluted excuses as to how they could run a society without a governing organization, without a government, right? And everything has to be, everything has to be voluntary, and they have to have consent for their own laws, and blah 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 blah. But when you, which is fine, and all that sounds great and awesome, and that's how shit should be, right? But then when you extend these ideas towards children, that's where they kind of break down. Because I think most of us out there in the world will agree that when it comes to the welfare of children, the well-being of children, that some coercion is necessary in order to safeguard their well-being, right? You have to have some sort of authority with some sort of law-making power and some ability to enforce laws in order to make sure that children aren't being exploited, that they're getting, they all have equal access and opportunities when it comes to things like education and healthcare, and to make sure that they're not being, trafficked and exploited for sex or used for, unfair labor, that they're not being forced to work in factories and or in fucking, um, cocoa fields or whatever, and should be in school, and that kind of thing. And you know, the thing is that when it comes to relationships between children and adults, those things are not equal, and a child really doesn't have the ability to make an informed, rational decision when it comes to these kinds of things, not really. And a lot of libertarian thought seems to be a lot of excuses that, to make up for this kind of flaw, and it's essentially a flaw in their philosophy, a shortcoming in their philosophy, where why is it okay for any other consenting adult to make any kind of contract they want, to enter into any kind of contract, or to basically do whatever they want, but not a child? So where does this begin? Where does it end? Blah 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 blah. And why is it not okay for a government to enforce rules when it comes to this kind of thing? And it's just where I really think it all kind of breaks down and shows that it's all just essentially bullshit. Right. So that's my introduction. Because you often hear, right, like that stereotype, like we said last week. You hear the stereotype of libertarians as being um, essentially just conservatives who want to do the sinful things, the conservatives that want to do drugs, and they want to smoke weed, and they want to engage in premarital sex and blah 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 blah. They're basically the conservatives that want to do all the fun stuff that liberals and progressives and other non-conservative types have no problem with, right? And in order to justify it to themselves, they have to come up with a lot of BS instead of just saying, "Hey, this shit's acceptable, just do it, whatever." You know, in order to make it fit in with their fucking morality, they have to come up with all kinds of convoluted horseshit in order to make it seem like it's consistent, when in real life it's not. And it would just be much easier if they would just say, yeah, you're allowed to do these things. Right? You're allowed to have sex with, people you're not married to. You're allowed to do drugs and smoke marijuana and et cetera, et cetera. But they can't do that because then if that would also mean you're allowed to have abortions and tax people, right? And use government power in order to ensure the general welfare of other people and shit like that. And they can't handle that kind of thing. So that's why they come up with these sort of convoluted rationalizations that don't make sense when you think about them for 5 minutes, instead of just admitting what everybody else seems to be, you know, what everybody else can say is plainly true, right? Um, so where does all this come from? And the result of all this is that Oh, sorry about that noise. While, like I said, there is a lot of pushback in libertarian circles and in the Libertarian Party and groups and stuff like that against these sort of basically invasion of fucking pedophiles. Sure does seem to be an awful lot of such people that get attracted to libertarian groups and self-identify themselves as libertarians, and it's almost kind of become a stereotype, a joke. This idea that libertarians are always trying to push the age of consent lower because it's filled with fucking child rapists. Right? Here's hoping that this, by the way, does not get my stream kicked because, I don't know. I'm pretty sure someone's either going to report me about this. I'm going to try to limit my use of certain words in this stream just because I don't want the YouTube bots to cancel my stream here if they think I'm whatever. Right, that's bad. So hopefully my stream just doesn't get shut off randomly for no fucking reason. That would not be a good thing. Let's see. So blah blah blah. Where were we? Okay. Now, what's the rational basis, the intellectual anchor for this view that why all of these types of deviants show up in the Libertarian Party? And it's because of their view of human rights extends from property rights. And this is a thing that you'll see kind of most people who call themselves libertarians, most libertarian groups, and movements and whatever, will adopt something akin to this, right? The idea that you own yourself, the only rights that you have are property rights, right? And human rights are, in fact, an extension of property rights. And the first thing that you own is your own body. So that's why you're allowed to, say, engage in any kind of contract that you want with anybody because it's your body. And as an extension of that, you can do whatever the hell you want with your body, right? And so that's why pretty much whenever it comes down to any kind of discussion of rights at all with libertarians, human rights or whatever, it always circles back around to property rights. Well, crimes are somebody violating your property rights, for example. A guy stealing from you is actually stealing your property. A person who rapes you is actually violating your body, which is your property, right? And all that stuff. And that's why if I want to work for somebody who's, gonna pay me 3 cents a day and shit, that's fine. I volunteered for that. I knew what I was getting into because I can do what I want with my body. And if that means I want to, that's why, and to some extent, this can also be applied to things like, prostitution or whatever, where you would say, those types of victimless crimes, which a lot of people on the left even agree with, right? That, yeah, we shouldn't have laws against things like prostitution, right? In my opinion, at least, And so the thing is, it's not all bad, but just because you agree with somebody doesn't mean that they're correct. That's the other thing. Like, you may come to the same conclusion but for completely different reasons. So it's still valid to criticize them, in my opinion, even if, for example, uh, I agree with a libertarian stance on prostitution or drug use or war, those types of things. I still think it's logically consistent to be able to criticize those people, criticize their views on these things because of the way they arrive at them, you know, because they take this stance that it's due to property rights, and I don't think it's due to property rights. I think it's due to fucking human rights, you know, me personally. So that's another thing I want to get a disclaimer. I'm going to be talking about lots of vile shit in this stream. None of this is my opinion. I don't believe in any of this stuff. I'm actually criticizing this stuff, so Please keep that in mind. In fact, I think I'll have to say that disclaimer a couple of times through this stream, just so people don't confuse me with somebody who actually supports this shit. It's like, no, I don't support this stuff, so please don't cancel me. Right. Anyway, all right. I'll try to keep the coffee drinking down to a minimum as well, but your mouth gets dry when you talk like this. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, and all of that's fine when you're talking about adults, right? But when you talk about children, not so cut and dry, you know. And this is why, because it's generally frowned upon in the West, at least. Most of the developed nations of the world, things it's generally frowned upon to exploit children in the ways that we do adults. And what do I mean by that? Child labor laws. We have laws against children working. We have laws against children signing contracts. That kind of thing. And one of those is, of course, children having sex with adults. We have laws against those things because we've agreed as a society, for the most part, that those things are bad. Well, libertarians don't really like that because since they see every human right as property rights, right? Then, well, children also have property rights. So children should also have the right to engage in these types of voluntary contracts. It's all a voluntary contract to them. So a child working in a coal mine and shit, voluntary contract. A child being taken advantage of and sex trafficked or whatever, as long as the parent agrees, voluntary contract. We'll talk a little bit about that later as well, you know. Um, so it doesn't, but that's why they tend to be against things like child labor laws, things like age of consent laws, and that's just and it's kind of become a big problem within libertarian circles. So I will say that it seems lately the official, at least in the United States, the official Libertarian Party of the United States has fought back against this kind of thing. For example, in the 2020 Libertarian Party platform, there's no mention of the age of consent for children at all. Wasn't always like that in the past. I have here, let me see if I can find it in my notes, from the 2004 Libertarian Party platform. This was actually, you guys can look this up if you want. This was actually part of their platform, was the repeal of age of consent laws. So this is what it says. We call for the repeal of all laws that restrict anyone, including children, from engaging in voluntary exchanges of goods, services, or information regarding human sexuality, reproduction, birth control, or related medical or biological technologies. So on the surface, that doesn't sound so bad, right? Kind of sounds like, oh, well, that means children, if they wanted to, could get, say, condoms if they wanted. They could get sexual education. They could, get information or even engage in, say, trans surgery, like bottom surgery, something like that. Read it a little closer. We call for the repeal of all laws that restrict anyone, including children, from engaging in voluntary exchanges of goods, services, or information regarding human sexuality. Goods, services, or information. So that would include prostitution. That would include services. That's a service. That would include child pornography. That's a good. Basically, it's saying, hey, these are all voluntary things that a child should be allowed to engage in, and it fits with the libertarian philosophy. The libertarian philosophy that you own your body, and you can do what you want with your body, and even a child owns their body, And so who cares if it's just them being exploited by criminals or whatever. If you want to live in a perfect libertarian society, they should be allowed to do it. That was their party platform, in 2004. 2004 is not that long ago, you know. It seems like ancient history, right? Not really. 2004 is you know, like if you think Lord of the Rings came out in 2001, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, that's how long ago we're talking. This is like younger than the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This is younger than Star Wars Episode 3. This is you know, this is right around the same time the third Matrix movie came out. So that's not that long ago, you know. I mean, I guess it's ancient history if you're 16 or whatever. You know, if you're 18 and you're a young Reddit libertarian or some shit like that, right? But anyway, so yeah, you can kind of see that they've Brain Bug. How you doing, man? Thanks for joining. You can kind of see that there's a definite problem, right, in libertarian movements and libertarian circles and such like that. So much that they're fighting back against it, right? Where does all this come from? Well, kind of comes from this idea that children, well, there's certain stances within libertarianism regarding this. So there's some people that say that children just don't have any rights at all, right? Because they're not fully formed adults, and that only adults have the right to property, right? Because technically children can't own anything, which I don't know how true that is. I mean, I thought children could own stuff, but I guess not. I guess you don't really own anything until you're a until you're an adult, and if you're a minor, then your parents own it, right? I'll have to do some research on that. That kind of sounds like bullshit to me, you know. But so you see, kind of even libertarian, sort of politicians taking the same stance, the stance that, well, it's up to the parents to decide. This is not something that, and they'll say this when it comes to things like, not just the age of consent, but also child labor laws, vaccination mandates, that kind of thing. It's not up to the state, shouldn't be up to the state. It should be up to the parents to decide this, right? Senator Rand Paul said took this very same stance way back in 2015 in an interview with CNBC. Basically said that the state doesn't own your children, parents own the children. And because they were talking about, let me see here, let me copy this. I'm not going to open this, I'll just put this down in the chat for you guys so you can check it out later if you want to see Rand Paul be an asshole. There's the link there. But basically on CNBC in 2015, they were talking about vaccine mandates, right? Keep in mind this is 5 years ago, 6 years ago, so this is way before the whole pandemic that we have now, which kind of shows that Rand Paul was always an asshole. He was always an anti-vaxxer and an insane person. And even way back then, but I guess at least he's consistent, right? Way back then, he was still against vaccine mandates, and he said it should be up to the parents because, and this is the exact quote, the state doesn't own your children, parents own the children. And it is an issue of freedom and public health. So, kind of, now that might kind of not register with people what exactly that he said. Kind of makes it sound like, oh, well, the parents have the right to decide these things for your children, right? Now, that's actually my personal view as well. But like I said, just because my view may line up with these people sometimes doesn't mean they're correct. And it's because I don't think that parents actually own their children, right? I think children are individuals, and as individuals are, me personally, I think they should be entitled to the same protections that adults have, you know, guaranteed to you by your civil rights and whatnot. Rand Paul doesn't really think that. He literally said owns their children. And I don't think that really registered with a lot of people when he said that, right? I think even people today would read that and they would not really understand exactly what he means. What the fuck do you mean parents own their children? Well, that's actually a kind of I wouldn't say the dominant string of thought in libertarian circles, but it's definitely a major point that they all kind of subscribe to, right? It's because children are not fully formed adults, so they technically don't own their own bodies, and their parents are the ones that own their bodies because since children are not fully formed and they don't have the same natural rights that adults do. And until then, their parents act as stewards of them, essentially. This is kind of like the view that you get from Murray Rothbard, right? Like we said last stream, Murray Rothbard was sort of like the de facto leader of libertarian movement back in the 70s and 80s and late 60s. And a lot of libertarians still kind of follow that view that he had, right? That basically the parents are in charge, and he kind of took it to some extreme views. So here's another link. This is from the Mrs. Institute, which is another libertarian think tank. I won't open this either, so you guys can check that out if you want. And this is a whole thing about Murray Rothbard and the ethics of liberty, right? Where he talks about the rights that children have and what they don't have. So according to him, according to Rothbard, each person owns themselves, right? We kind of went over that a little bit. And then, that means you can do whatever you want. That's the basis for the idea that you can do whatever the hell you want because you own your body, right? But children don't, because children are not self-owners. They are potential self-owners. They don't actually own themselves yet because they're too young, essentially. They're not fully formed. They don't, and as such, they're not capable of making rational, informed decisions, right? Which would make sense. You would say, like, hey, well, when it comes to things like the age of consent or right, or let's say work laws, if a child labor laws, things like that, children signing contracts, that would make you think that you would say, well, hey, if they're not fully formed, if they're not, they're potential self-owners, then that should mean that they should not be able to engage in any of that shit because they don't actually own their own bodies. Yeah, that would make logical sense, right? But that's not the conclusion they bring. The conclusion that he essentially brings is that, well, you know, um, parents are the ones that own the children, essentially. Parents are the stewards of the children. They have 100% responsibility for the children, right? And that can lead to very strange outcomes because he also doesn't believe that anybody should be coerced into doing anything. And that also includes positive things, right? So according to Murray Rothbard, right, um, your parent, if you're a parent, you don't have a right to violate your child's, self-ownership or potential self-ownership. You don't have that right, right? So you're not allowed to kill them. You're not allowed to beat them to death. You're not allowed to, you know, do anything like that, right? But the state is also, according to him, not allowed to force you to do anything, any benevolent actions. Okay. And this is the same reason that libertarians essentially give for, um, being against things like living wage laws or even minimum wage laws or universal health care, anything like that. They say, well, these are all things that should be voluntary, right? I shouldn't be forced in order to, you shouldn't force me by taking my tax dollars and giving it to somebody else so that they can get health care, for example, or so that they can get police protection, or so they can get fire protection, or for they can get, anything. You shouldn't force me. It should all be a voluntary transaction. I should give it to a charity, and then that charity, I should voluntarily give it to that charity, but and that charity can do it. But if you try to make me do it by force, then that's wrong, right? And that actually, in Rothbard's view, extends all the way to benevolent actions one would do for their children, such as feeding their child, educating their child, getting them health care, showing them affection, buying them clothes, things like that. So according to Murray Rothbard, who, remember, was the el numero uno when it came to, libertarian big thinker heavyweight guys, right, intellectuals and shit, he says that means parents don't have an obligation to legally have an obligation to feed, clothe, educate, or take care of their child. So a parent cannot just take a shotgun and shoot their kid's face off and kill them, but they could, if they wanted to, just not buy them any food and let them starve to death in their house, and the state should not should not then throw them in jail or do anything negative towards them, because that would be coercing them into doing a positive thing, which is like, nope. According to him, you can starve your own child to death if you feel like it, because it's your kid and you have the rights, right? So, which is, and that just kind of goes to show that, I think, is one of the limitations of libertarian thought right there. That idea that, well, if it's all 100% free and voluntary and blah, 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 then that means I can voluntarily let my children starve to death. That seems like something's wrong there. Seems like something shouldn't be working. That seems like bullshit. And I would say that the majority of people out there, you know, who hear that would agree with me, wouldn't you? No free. It's not a free society. The definition of a free society doesn't mean that you're free to basically murder a child through neglect. That's bullshit, right? That doesn't make any sense at all. That's how the fuck it doesn't make any sense at all. And then, also the government is not free to come and take that child away either. That's the other thing, because that's what happens if you try to do that in real life. If you just like don't buy your kid any food and you keep them in a fucking closet all day and you don't get them education and you don't bathe them, you don't fucking do any of that shit, you don't take them to the doctor, whatever, people from Child Protective Services are going to show up and take your kid away because you're obviously not capable of taking care of that child. Well, according to Murray Rothbard, and by extension him, also a large number of libertarians. Remember, you can't say all of them because libertarians are it's like trying to herd cats. They all have their own different opinions, but a very widespread opinion, according to them, is that, well, the state also shouldn't be allowed to come take this child away if you're obviously not caring for it, because that's also a violation of your rights. Because as the child's parent, you are the steward of their body. They're not self-owners. So because you're the steward, you essentially own the child, right? Just like Rand Paul said, parents own their children, right? So the rationalization for this comes from the idea that they kind of pervert the same idea that it's, the rationalization for a woman to abort a fetus, right? They also say that's property rights as well. And it's the same kind of rationalization. They go, well, you know, the woman, the fetus is just sort of like a temporary resident inside of the woman's body. And since the woman has free reign to do whatever the hell she wants with her body, she can evict the tenant. And it's, she's under no obligation to keep it alive, blah, 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 blah. Right. Once again, like I said, just because I also support abortion does not mean that, that doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to criticize the libertarian ideal when it comes to their rationalization for abortion. Because I also think that's bullshit as well, right? The idea that a fetus is a tenant. Fetus is not a tenant. The fetus is not a human being, in my opinion. You know, but that's also keep in mind a lot of libertarians are also anti-abortion as well, and they don't follow that idea. This is just kind of like the logical extension of Murray Rothbard's philosophy. And like I said, it doesn't always make a lot of sense or match up or isn't very logically consistent or morally reprehensible. You know. Um, right. Let's see. So that's why they also say that, the same reason that you have the ability to abort a fetus if you don't, for any reason. The example that he uses in his writing is if, say, the fetus has a disease or something like that, you know, and that's perfectly legal, but he gives that example. Where's what happened to my thing here? There it is. Okay. That was weird. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, yeah, so that's why you should be allowed to the same reason why you're allowed to get an abortion is why you're allowed to let children just starve to death after they're born, which, makes perfect fucking sense, I guess, if you're a libertarian. Um, Another extension of that is that, well, parents then, if they're the stewards of their children's bodies, then they essentially own their children. Then they should be allowed to basically sell their children if they want. So if there's someone else who wants the child and is better, you know, somebody else who wants it and is willing to pay, the parent should be able to engage in a financial transaction, sell the kid to somebody else. And the way they frame it, the way that Murray Rothbard frames it in his writing is that, well, this will be a person that's better capable or willing is more willing or capable of taking care of the child and providing for its needs, right? But is that really what you think would happen when you hear the term "sell a child"? Are you thinking that it's like a guy wants to buy a kid and then so that he can like feed it and educate it and like take it to the park and Disneyland and shit and like love it and all that? Do you really, is that what comes to your mind? Because that's not what comes to my mind. What comes to my mind is much more nefarious and disgusting because y'all know that if you were allowed to sell kids, those would be the people who are in the market for children. And, the bad people who would do very vile and disgusting things with said children if they were allowed to just purchase them. Of course, the libertarian response to that would be, well, you can choose not to sell the kid if you want. That would be their response. But, what would happen in real life? See, that's the other thing. That's the other limitation that libertarians have, is that they don't actually think about real world like scenarios. Like what would happen in real life if you were allowed to just sell a kid? If that was, legal. You could have a child, you didn't want it anymore, you could just put an ad on fucking Craigslist. Hey, I've got a very healthy 8-year-old white male by the name of Bobby. He can read, he can write, he likes dinosaurs, right? What do you think the people that are going to come and buy your kid, you think they're going to be like, oh, I love him so much, he's going to look great, I'm going to change his name to blah, 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 and, then we're going to give him, he's going to go to Harvard. No, that's not what would happen. That is not what would happen. Anybody who thinks so is an idiot, you know. Now they'll list things like, oh, well, you already have a free market for children. They're called adoption agencies. Well, that's different. You don't sell children to fucking adoption agencies. You give them away for free because you can't take care of the kid and it's the best decision for the child. And it's extremely hard to adopt a child. You have to jump through all kinds of fucking hoops, you know? They don't just take anybody. They do all kinds of screenings and training, and usually you have to like, you have to be a foster parent first and all this other shit. You don't just show up and be like, okay, I'll take that one over there. Yeah, you're right. And then like the kids are in cages and shit, and then they take them out and give the kid a microchip and like all that. No, it's not like fucking adopting a dog. It's like there's all kinds of protections they put in for the safety of the child, right? So it's not a free market, you know, in children. That's complete bullshit. And it's that kind of just shows, where their head is at, number one, where, this is what actually happens when you know, treat human beings like they're fucking property, right? That's the first thing, you know. Second thing is sort of like, Jesus Christ. It just really shows like where, the limits of this sort of thinking, this philosophy, this idea that everything is based on property rights. It's not based on property. There are certain things that you don't, I don't know, you can't just quantify with a fucking monetary transaction. And even using something like a monetary transaction as a fucking metaphor for it is just bizarre and wrong. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, this is kind of where that comes from. This idea that parents own their children, you know, that all that stuff. And by extent of this, a parent should be able to sell their child into essentially slavery. You know, that's where all this comes from. And this is like a lot of, it's very prevalent in libertarian circles. And it seems like they fought a long time over this. And it's only been very recently that they've kind of pushed back on the more disgusting elements of it. Of course, so some examples. Lew Rockwell is a protege of Murray Rothbard, right? Who also kind of said this same kind of stance, said very similar comments to this, right? Lew Rockwell is, of course, he was part of. He was a guy that most likely authored Ron Paul's racist newsletters back in the 70s and 80s, right? I don't know if you guys don't know about that. Ron Paul, way back in the day before the internet, used to have this newsletter that would go out that were like highly, highly racist and disgusting, and would talk about how black people were fleet-footed and prone to crime and shit like that. So Lew Rockwell is, of course, a big-time libertarian. And his quote is that we are saddled with anti-work laws that stunt young people's lives. What does he mean by that? The fact that what kids should be in factories instead of going to school, that'll make their lives better somehow. I don't know. But yeah, kind of takes a stance very close to, Murray Rothbard there. Another guy, his name was Williamson Bill Evers. And he's the former Libertarian candidate for Congress, advisor to the 2008 McCain presidential campaign as well. He also made comments that said that agrees with Rothbard that a parent should be allowed to starve their child to death. So it's like, it's not just cranks. That's the thing, right? You hear about this stuff and you think, oh, well, this is just, these are just cranks and weirdos and pedophiles on the internet and 4chan and shit saying these things, right? No, that's not true. It's like major leaders within the Libertarian Party express these views. The actual Libertarian Party itself, or high-profile libertarian-leaning Republicans, or leaders in libertarian philosophy and thought, authors and leaders of the party and the intellectual backbone of libertarianism also express these thoughts. So it's not just a problem with like, edgelords and shit on like fucking some internet chat room somewhere, right? That's saying this shit. It's like these are the fucking like the establishment as much as the Libertarian Party or groups or anything actually has an establishment. Right. Let's see here. Where were we at here? Here's a guy named Max Moore. If you haven't heard of him, he's a futurist and an author. He often talks about transhumanism, stuff like that. And this is what I found to be a very common view of libertarians online. His birth name was Max O'Connor. And I'm going to kind of read some of this for you guys, right? So, because this view that I found here from this guy, Max Moore, was something that I ran into a lot while researching this. It was like a very, very, very common view among libertarians when it came to the age of consent, when it came to just, child labor laws and children's rights in general. This seemed to be like probably, you know, probably the most common behind, along with what Murray Rothbard said, where, parents own their children essentially. This was like also a very common view. And I want to actually read some of this to you guys. So I'm going to put this up on the screen. And this is from, I couldn't get the actual website, but this is from Google's web cache of this, if you want to read this for yourself later. Right. Now, I do want to say that this guy here, Max Moore, right, he wrote this when he was 18 years old in 1983. So that's a long time ago. And he wrote this entire disclaimer here, basically saying that he doesn't agree with this shit anymore. Right. But even in this disclaimer, he still kind of pushes back on the age of consent a little bit. So it's like, oh, I don't agree with this completely, but here's the reasons why I still kind of do a little bit. That's basically this entire disclaimer that he wrote. But this is not that long, so I'm going to read some of it for you guys, right? When it comes to the age of consent here. Basically, he's talking about, why the age of consent is anti-libertarian, right? And I'm going to skip around here. I'm not going to read this entire thing, obviously, but here's a little bit. Whose rights are violated when it comes to this? So he's basically talking about, well, it's called sex coercion in the age of consent. Whose rights are violated, right? Libertarians maintain that all individuals have the right to be free from physical attack or the threat of attack. No one has any greater claim on the actions of another than is permitted by this principle and the property rights it implies. See, there you go, property rights. It's not about human rights, it's about property rights. But I'll try to keep the comments to a minimum until I read a paragraph or so. Anyway, are the rights of the children who are approached being violated? It is not clear that they are. If children are coerced into submitting into sex by the use of force or by threats, then this is certainly a violation of their rights and the attacker should be sharply dealt with. It is difficult to comprehend how merely becoming friendly with a child and then encouraging him or her to indulge in sexual activities can be a violation of rights. Let's read that one again. Right. Let me just highlight that for you here. Right. Let me highlight that for you. It is difficult to comprehend how merely becoming friendly with a child and then encouraging him or her to indulge in sexual activities can be a violation of rights. That's basically the definition of grooming right there. When you go to a child, someone who's underage, it's like a 13-year-old girl or something, and you're like 26, and you just basically groom her, you become her friend, shit like that, with the hope that when she becomes 18, she'll have sex with you. That's what he's just basically saying right there. All right. Yeah. Is it not more likely that the horrified reactions of most people stem from a bigoted opposition to any form of sex that they themselves either do not find attractive or have guiltily repressed thoughts of? So yeah, it's because you yourself are not a pedophile. That's why, and you're a bigot. That's why you don't, That's why pedophilia is illegal, not because it's wrong, not because it violates the rights of a child or uses coercion to exploit people who are not capable of making consent, anything like that. It's because you yourself are a bigot. Like how that shit's been turned around there. Moving on. Those participating in voluntary acts of oral sex, bondage, sadomasochism, and sex with another or the same gender have all been persecuted, and yet there is no violation of rights involved in any of these. Indeed, while most of us do not find all of these practices appealing, we are not thereby forced to conclude that they are immoral. Human beings commonly differ over what novels, foods, films, styles of clothing they enjoy, but they do not often regard those with deviant tastes in these areas as immoral. Why should sexual preferences be treated differently? Now, why am I reading this? Because this is going to link back into some other shit that I'm going to say later. But just keep that part in mind. He's basically saying that sex with children is just a preference. It has nothing to do with any of this other stuff. It's all just because you just prefer it that way, right? I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there's a little bit more that I want to read. So, because it's mainly this chunk. So let's read that. Many people object that sex with children is rights violating because individuals below the age of consent do not know what they are doing, and therefore the compliance is not voluntary at all. I believe this argument is fallacious, and that it is invariably presented by a kind of mental reflex action and not as a result of conscious deliberation. Even most of these people will admit when pressed that the age of consent is set at an arbitrary level. It is obvious that children develop at different rates. Some pre-teenage juveniles are more able than many adults. Others never acquire much knowledge or intelligence. It is seriously claimed that a 14-year-old of average aptitude doesn't know what sex is. Even 9-year-olds have sometimes experienced orgasm through masturbation. So that's an argument you see a lot. And the reason I'm reading this is because I kept coming and I kept coming into this over and over and over again when I was researching for this episode. This same attitude that he just said right here, okay? It's obvious that children develop at different rates, right? And some kids are more developed physically and emotionally than others. And so they should be allowed to, do what they want. I kept running into that just over and over and over and over. And it's like, you know, it's God. So this sort of like exemplifies that, that attitude a lot. Like this is a very, very common thing amongst libertarians. And it's kind of bullshit. Like, here's the thing about that, okay? Because when you're a kid, you don't know anything. That's the reason why you can't consent. It doesn't, the reason why you can't consent when you're a child doesn't have to do with the fact that you're not physically developed or your brain is not physically developed. It's because you are in a position of weakness. It's because, first off, you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge to be able to have a fulfilling relationship with even somebody your own age most of the time, let alone someone who's 5, 10, 15, 20 years older than you, right? And because of that, you have a mismatched power dynamic when it comes to relationships between children and adults most of the time, right? In fact, probably all the time. I mean, shit. That's the entire reason behind it. And it's because the adult then exploits the child and gets them to do things they don't want to do, right? And engage in acts that they don't want to engage in. And it's because the child is coming from a position of weakness, a position of exploitation, right? You often see when children have just, normal friendships with adults, right? Is that the child usually if will take that as sort of a parental figure. You ever see that? I had a friend way back in the day when I was a kid who his dad divorced his mom when they were like, toddlers. And he never had a dad. And all through growing up, he would always latch on to male father figures over and over and over, and not always the best people either. And it was fucking obvious to everybody but him that it's like you only hang out with this guy who's like 5 years older than you because you want a big brother, you want a male father figure, you want a guy to take you to the zoo and take you to the ball game and tell you you did good on your report card and shit like that. Right. Well, the adult will then take that relationship and exploit it and push it towards a sexual relationship that the child isn't ready or capable of even understanding. They're not ready for it. They're not even able to grasp what that even means. When you're 9, 10, 11, you don't have sexuality, not really. You know, most kids are just even starting to begin going through puberty, and they have a vague notion of like what nasty stuff is. I mean, I'm sure kids today see shit on the internet and get an idea pretty young, right? But still, they don't know what any of that stuff means, and they're not emotionally mature enough to even handle it when that happens. And it ends up, when they get sexually abused like this, it ends up fucking them up for the rest of their fucking lives, right? For their entire life afterwards, that they'll have psychological trauma and mental illness and all this other shit that'll stem from being fucking molested as a child, right? Um, so here's the thing, because this is why I thought, this is why I wanted to read this stuff, because this is the libertarian view on this, right? And I ran into this a lot everywhere because they don't want the state in order to, well, here, before I get into that, let's read a little bit more of this. Okay, before we go on, I just want to read these next 2 paragraphs and then I'll turn this shit off. All right. But we can go further. Does it really matter whether a young child has experienced any form of sexual arousal before? Does it really matter whether the child has any understanding of sex? Sex is just another source of pleasure, a potential potent source perhaps, but basically little different to any other. If there is anything objectionable about a young adult giving a child sweets or toys, why is giving sexual pleasure wrong? Did you hear that, folks? If there's nothing objectionable about an adult giving a child sweets or toys, why is giving sexual pleasure wrong? It's just like giving a kid a candy bar, you know. I'm laughing because it's horrible. I don't mean to be laughing at this, but that's how I react when I read shit or see things that are horrible. Is it ludicrous to reply that the adult is abusing the child for his or own pleasure? Such an attitude implies a hatred of all pleasure gained through voluntary exchange to mutual benefit. Altruists, conservatives, and some socialists may think this way, but no rational person should do so after contemplating the implication. And why is it abuse? Below the age of 12 or so, a child may not be particularly interested in seeking sexual relations, but that doesn't mean he or she will not voluntarily accept and enjoy them. So here you go. That's another thing that I always saw. In every place I went to research this, they always, that's the thing, is that the libertarians, the people that say this shit kind of know what they're saying is vile and disgusting, so they always will put an age, but they'll say like it'll always be lower than what the legal age of consent is. So they'll say, well, because in most states in the United States, for example, the age of consent is 16. But most of them, where I would go, they would say, oh, it should be 14 or whatever. But none of them will actually say, yeah, a 5-year-old should be allowed to have sex with an adult. So they know that, so the idea that there should be an age, that there's a cutoff, is perfectly fucking reasonable to them. They just think it should be way lower because they're like dumbass rationalizations about, coercion and the use of force and voluntary laws and all this other bullshit means that, they can't just have the state choose an age and enforce that, because that's somehow fucking unjust, and so they have to rationalize away injustice done to young children because they're not willing to accept that a state is morally capable of fucking enforcing a law. It's bullshit. It's like a lot of libertarian thought. It's all just roundabout horseshit rationalizations so that they can like get away with doing shit that they want, not paying taxes and having sex with underage girls. It's such horseshit. One more paragraph. It is true that children questioned in court over alleged sex crimes have often shown great distress. Gee, I wonder why. But as many psychiatrists have attested, this is due to the great public attention, horror expressed by parents, and cross-examination under pressure in court. Uh-huh. It's not because of any shame. It's not because they're afraid that the person who's been manipulating them is going to hurt them or their parents or anything like that. It's because, oh, the pressure in court means the kid doesn't want to talk. The circus going on in this guy's head, just blows me away, right? It is those who wish to retain the age of consent laws who are responsible for this emotional pain. If a child does not want to go to court, has not told the parents about his or her sexual activities, and has shown no signs of upset or fear, then there is no justification for assuming the use of coercion. God. Yeah. If the kid, that's kind of, you know what that reminds me of right there? That line right here. If a child doesn't want to go to court, has not told the parents about their sexual activities, and has shown no signs of upset or fear, there's no justification for assuming the use of coercion. That reminds me of biblical laws, in the Bible. Like, for example, in the Bible, if a woman gets raped but doesn't cry out, then it's not rape. That's actually in, the Christian Bible, right? And there are laws like that, oh, well, if a woman doesn't report a rape, then it's not rape. That must mean that, she's not saying anything. That must mean that she likes it. That's basically what he just said right here. Oh, the kid didn't say anything. The kid, is not upset, is showing no signs of fear. That must mean that they like it. So that must mean it's okay. It's like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how vile and even like inconsistent with our own fucking beliefs this shit is. I don't know. Hence, no legal action should be brought. On the other hand, if some evidence does exist, it is the child's word against that of the adult. Since it is unlikely that a child will maliciously bring an action for no reason, and this is eventually subject to examination by the defense, a court will commonly fine for the child. So it's okay, because if a child does complain, a court will fine for the child. But if they don't complain, totally okay, then they don't have to do it. I don't know. That's why I brought this up, and, I recommend just reading this, because this basically, this essay here is like probably 80% of what I found when I was doing this research. And I found these same stances over and over and over again. When I was talking about, when I was basically researching age of consent with libertarians. I showed you this last week, just to kind of prove my point here. This was a clip that I got off of Reddit. Somebody saying that this was in our libertarianism. I'd go with 14. The vast majority of people at that age are physically developed enough for sexual activity. Basically agreeing with exactly what this fucking guy said. Here's another one by a user called Children Can Consent. Talking about j.Ruwart, right? Children who willingly participate in sexual acts have the right to make that decision as well, even if it's distasteful to us personally. Some children will make poor choices just as some adults do in smoking and drinking to excess. When we outlaw child pornography, the prices paid for child performers will rise, increasing the incentives for parents to use children against their will. Kind of, kind of goes to show, like it's all just transactional, right? It's all like, since everything's a property right, then even things like CP are also property rights, and it's really kind of disgusting. It's disgusting the loops and the gymnastics that these people have to go through in order to justify their fucking views, because that's what they're doing. Sorry about all the squeaky chairs and shit. That's what they're doing. They're going through these mental exercises and trying to find ways in which they can square their beliefs about the use of force and, the non-aggression principle and all this other shit, which means that they don't have to pay taxes, trying to square that away with areas in life that most people agree that we need an authority in order to, you know, um, guarantee safety and liberty, and to make sure that children are not exploited. And that one of those things, one of those areas is, of course, the age of consent and child labor laws and that kind of thing. And it's like, and that's really what it comes down to. It really comes down to their desire to not pay taxes. And that's why they make up all this bullshit about, the age of consent. So yeah, that's why I wanted to read. Sorry, that was kind of long and shit, but wanted to kind of go through that because that was very, very, um, very, I guess, prevalent in the research that I did. So, this kind of makes you think, like why do we even have age of consent laws in the first place, right? And it's because, children are not capable of making rational decisions when it comes to certain things, And because having sex with, engaging in a sexual act is not a normal decision that, it has consequences. It's not like choosing the kind of breakfast cereal you want, or what kind of, TV show you want to watch, or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you can trust a child to choose their favorite animal or whatever clothes they want to wear or something like that. That is, they're capable of making those kinds of decisions, right? They're capable of deciding what they want to eat for dessert or whatever, but not so much when it comes to decisions that have long-term consequences. A 5-year-old has only been alive for 5 years, right? 5 years ago is like, Obama was president. I mean, seriously, it's not that long, and you think like, my car is older than 5 years. Like you have to kind of put this shit in perspective. It's not about so much about freedom and being logically consistent and all that shit. It's about protecting people who are not capable of protecting themselves because they're simply not old enough. And I would even extend that all the way to someone who's 16. And I know that in many states in the United States, 16 is the age of consent. It happens to be 18 where I am in California, right? But still, 16 is not that long either. 16 is 2005, That's like, I mean, shit. Fucking The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker came out in 2005. Like, that's not that long ago either. Like, you got to think about these things. You got to put these things in perspective. Even someone who's 16, 17, you know, is barely capable of making these long-term decisions, is barely capable of thinking about what's going to be going on in their lives 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now. You know what I mean? So why do we have an age of consent? Why do we choose, 16 in most states and 18 in California? And, because it's different in various places. This is actually an argument that you'll see libertarians making when it comes to be against the age of consent. They'll say, well, if there is this cutoff date, then how come it's different in every place that you live? It's in other countries, in most countries on Earth, it's 16. Most of Europe, most of South America, it's 16, right? Many places in Africa, it's way lower. Angola, the age of consent is 12. That was the lowest that I can find, right? Japan, it's 13 in Japan, which that kind of blows me away because Japan seems to me to be a rather conservative country, at least socially. I guess I don't really understand how that shit works, but that's kind of weird. Colombia, it's 14, right? Most other countries have it at 16. You know, Spain, the UK, most places in Europe, most other places in South America, it's 16. Most states in the United States, it's 16. You know, there are a few where it's 17 and 18. And there's also things like what they call Romeo laws, you know, where, for example, if there's like a certain year gap in between, like say there's somebody that, you know, because they could still be in high school. Like, for example, if you have a guy who's 18 years old and his girlfriend's 17 or whatever, in most states in the United States, they'll still allow that because they're both still kids and they're both still in high school. Like, you know, he might be a senior and she might be a junior or something like that. And that's not, you know. So in most states in the country, there'll be some kind of Romeo law. Not all the states, though. California has no Romeo law whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it's illegal in California for even minors to have sex with each other. So if you're in California and you get busted, if you're 17, oh, thank you, honey. Sorry. If you're 17 and you have sex with your 16-year-old girlfriend, and her parents find you, they could conceivably have you arrested. You know, I never do that. That's kind of fucked up. I think that's like really the only place in the country in the United States that has this problem. But it's also different depending, you know, there are some countries on Earth where there is no age of consent because premarital sex is just illegal in general. Most of these tend to be theocracies in the Middle East, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Kuwait, um, Pakistan, uh, Qatar, the Sudan. All of these places, the United Arab Emirates, all of these places, not allowed to have premarital sex whatsoever. You got to be married. So it's like, doesn't matter how old she is. She could be 25, right? She could be 78. If you're not married, you're going to jail, right? Of course, who knows how much this stuff is actually enforced. I know that in places like Iran, for example, they have morality of police that go around. So this is kind of the complete opposite end of the spectrum here, you know, where they like the state is forcing you to like fucking be married and shit. But there's also, even in this country, even in the United States, there are exceptions for when somebody's married, for example. There are, from what I saw, let me see, I thought I wrote this down. In Massachusetts, for example, a girl as young as 12 years old can get married, right? According to certain circumstances. If they have permission from their parents and a judge also agrees and some other shit like that, they can get married. Lots of states in the country have exemptions for that. Maryland, it's 15. You know, most states you can get married at 16. That's kind of fucked up. That doesn't seem right to me. It seems to me like, you know, I don't see, I kind of agree with that as well when libertarians say, why is it different in every state? I agree with that too. Why is it different in every state? It should be higher. Number one, it should be 18 in every fucking state, right? There should be no exemptions for getting married. There should be no exemptions for religion. That's another thing. There's like religious exemptions and shit. Fuck all that, you know, because the laws should be designed to protect people, not to not to fucking curtail and back down for people's personal fucking religious beliefs or whatever. When it comes to the actual law, the secular law, your religion shouldn't matter. You know, shouldn't matter if you're a child bride or whatever from the fucking Sudan. When you come to the United States, you know, you should have to live according to United States law. You know, they would expect you, if you went to the Sudan, to live according to the fucking Sudanese law, wouldn't they? Of course. So why are we making fucking exceptions for like people like child brides and shit? Seems fucking wrong to me, right? And that's the libertarian stance, is that, well, we don't need a government forcing these things on us, right? And it should be instead enforced by social norms and customs, you know. And that's kind of that's what's actually kind of happening in real life right now. You know what I mean? That's sort of what it is. It is kind of enforced by social norms and customs. It's just those social norms and customs have been codified in the law in most places. You know, I mean, I don't know. I personally, I think 16 is too young. I think 16 is now. Here's the thing: if I were 18 years old, I would probably say 16 is not too young. I will admit that as a young man, I probably wouldn't have thought that. But as somebody who's now old enough to have a 16-year-old daughter, which I don't, but I am old enough to have one, I understand now that that's way too fucking young, right? And there's a reason, for example, why you can't join the army and why you can't buy alcohol at 16 and why you can't fucking buy cigarettes or gamble or any of that other shit at 16 because you're a fucking kid and you have no idea what the fuck's going on. And, I don't know, maybe that's just me getting more old and crotchety and conservative as I get older. Who knows? But it seems to make logical fucking sense to me. Um, So that's the thing is that libertarians think, well, the state shouldn't be determining these things, you know, and it should be up to local customs and local customs and fucking social norms. Well, here's the problem when it comes to that, right? How do you determine, first off, what local custom and what social norm are you talking about, right? Because that kind of, social norms and customs are not universal either, right? For anything, they depend even not even like when it comes to countries, not even everybody in a country follows all of the social norms or local customs or whatever, you know. It could be different region per region, right? And sometimes even within the same family, people don't follow the same customs. Here's a perfect example of this, right? At Christmas, my wife's family, they do a thing where they choose someone to go out and hand gifts to everybody on Christmas morning. That's their that's their kind of Christmas tradition. Usually the youngest person goes and hands out all of the gifts to people. Right. My family, we never did anything like that when I was growing up. My family, our only custom when it came to Christmas gifts was that we had to wait for everybody to show up, you know. And so my uncle, who lived like, 2 blocks away and shit, like would take all day to show up, and then like hours and hours would pass, right? So sometimes he'd show up at like 9 a.m. and we get to open the gifts early. Sometimes he'd come at like fucking 1 in the afternoon and we'd have to wait, and that was just the only thing that we did. And then eventually, as we all got older, that time would get pushed back further and further and further. Oh, everybody's not here yet. Wait, wait, wait. Until eventually, like when I was an adult and shit, we didn't even open gifts until after we ate dinner. So it'd be like 9 o'clock at night and stuff, and everybody's like, "Oh, we should go home. Oh, we got to open these gifts first." Right? I'm not even kidding. That's the tradition on my father's side of my family is now wait around until it's dark and eat dinner and then open the gifts. So just to kind of show you, it's like, well, there you go. Even one family doesn't have the same fucking like societal norms. So how are you going to enforce it? Right. Which norm do you choose? Do you choose the societal norm that says that it's okay for a 5-year-old to get married, 5-year-old to have sex with a 50-year-old, or do you choose the one where it says, oh, you're, seven, half your age plus 7 years or whatever? Do you choose that or what? How do you determine which norm gets, right? And then how do you enforce it? If it's not a state that's going to enforce these things, like let's say somebody decides to break this, this social norm and has a relationship with a teenager when they're like 36 or some shit like that. How do you enforce it? Well, if you don't want the police to come, if you don't think that there should be a law that the government is able to enforce in order to protect that child, then it's up to you to enforce it. So is it up to the parents? I guess so. I mean, remember, according to libertarians, children are the property of their parents, right? So what? Does that mean the mother or the father have to show up with a shotgun, blow the guy's nuts off? Is that how you do it, or do you sue them and do you have to sue them the same way that the libertarian solution for like pollution is? Is that what it is? You have to go sue a guy for taking advantage of your child. So then what? What do you have to like prove to a courtroom and shit that he's exploiting your child, that your child didn't want to actually engage in it, that your child wasn't like, giving their consent and shit when they're fucking 14 years old? Wouldn't it just be so much easier just to have a law that people vote for, like say somebody votes for a politician and then a politician makes a law saying, hey, if you're below the age of 18, you're not allowed to have sex with an adult. Yeah, right. Wouldn't that just be so much easier, so much cut and dry? Everybody would know what the law is, and then the police would come and enforce it, and then the people would have no fucking excuse for like engaging in the law. They wouldn't be able to say shit. Oh, well, she consented. She's old enough. Blah blah blah. Right. No, no. See, because that's, of course, that doesn't fit in with the whole like, you know, laws are voluntary horseshit that libertarians engage in. So of course we can't take the simple, easy solution that's proven to work and actually fucking protects people. You got to take this weird ass convoluted bullshit reason that allows them room to have sex with underage girls. It's kind of bullshit. This is libertarianism sucks. Right? So, moving on here. And here's the thing, it's like there are, I'm not just saying this. I'm not, it's not like I said before. It's not just kooks on the internet. It's not just, neats on 4chan or edgelords on Reddit or whatever the fuck that are saying this shit. It's like actual politicians that say these things. Big time, actual libertarians or people who, self-identify like celebrities and shit who are libertarians. Milo Yiannopoulos, here's a guy. I'm sure, we talked about him last time, so I won't spend too much time on him, but he had some comments, some pro-pedophile comments, basically his exact thing was that the age of consent was not a black and white thing, and that relationships between younger boys and older men can be hugely positive experiences. And he went on to say that to suggest that sex between younger boys and older men could be a part of a coming of age relationship kind of thing, in which those older men help those younger boys discover who they are. That kind of got him into a lot of trouble. He lost a book deal over that. He got basically fired from Breitbart. Says that he resigned, but yeah, let's be real, he got fired, and led him to getting canceled. I guess that was a step too far for his audience, and he got canceled all over the place. And Milo Yiannopoulos is now trying to reinvent himself as a Christian and has opened a anti-gay conversion therapy camp, one of those pray away the gay camps where people send their teenagers and shit to go fuck with their minds and try to brainwash them into not being gay. That's what Milo Yiannopoulos is doing. Another guy is named Alan Dershowitz, pretty high-profile libertarian. I'm sure you've heard of this guy. He was part of Trump's impeachment defense team, among other things. He also was the legal defense for Jeffrey Epstein in 2008. So that's Alan Dershowitz here. He has said, some of his most notable quotes has said that the president is more powerful than a king. He said that about Trump. He was also an advisor to O.J. Simpson's legal defense team way back in the 90s. So it kind of shows you, dude's a little bit of an ambulance chaser, right? And as well as part of Julian Assange's, defense team as well. So I have kind of a mixed opinion on Julian Assange also, but, we won't get into that here. And also was part of Harvey Weinstein's defense in 2018. So anyway, why am I bringing him up is because, he's also kind of a big-time libertarian, and he was accused by Virginia Roberts. I'm probably going to mispronounce her last name here. It's Giffer, Julia Roberts Giffer, who was an accuser of Jeffrey Epstein. And he was accused by her of basically that Epstein trafficked her roughly 6 times to have sex with Alan Dershowitz when she was an underage child. Alan Dershowitz has, of course, countersued and denied and all of this other stuff, right? Um, this person, Gifford, also said that, she was trafficked to Prince Andrew as well. So this is, I'm sure you've probably heard about the Prince Andrew allegations. This is the same woman. Um, Dershowitz has also made comments in support of torture and saying that torture may save lives. So that's the kind of guy this is. Got some nice, and he's a staunch libertarian. Got some nice sexual rape allegations here connected with Jeffrey Epstein there. That's a nice guy. Kind of already talked about Mary j.Ruwart. That was that one quote that I said before. Mary j.Ruwart, was a leading candidate for the Libertarian Party presidential nomination in 2008. She's the one that said that CP, prices for CP will go up if we outlaw it. That kind of thing. That quote that I said about half an hour ago. Here's a guy. Let me open this up. Open this link. This guy's name is, his name is Arvin Vorha, and he's the Libertarian Vice Chair. So here's some tweets from, basically comments from Arvin Vorha, right? A 19-year-old woman has sex with a 15-year-old boy who is violated the taxpayers who non-consensually pay for government schools. Yep. Vice Chair of the Libertarian Party. If a 14-year-old has a kid, I would prefer the other person to be an adult with a job. Ugh. Oh my god. It's just so backwards. One more. Arvin Vorha. Oh, please spare me the idea that it's totally natural for 2 men to have sex, but it's an abomination for a 25-year-old man to have sex with a 15-year-old girl. It is just too stupid to consider. The libertarian view, do what you want as long as you don't hurt anyone else. That's why we want government out of marriage, love, and sex. I like this response here. That was maybe the creepiest thing I've ever read. See that? Do what you want as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. They're incapable of understanding that in this scenario, it's hurting the 15-year-old girl. And it's a flaw with their philosophy. They don't understand that it's because they don't understand power dynamics. They don't understand that the girl is being exploited by the man in that situation, and is being used, and because the 15-year-old girl does not have the intelligence or the experience or the emotional maturity to be able to handle a relationship like that, they refuse to, and it's the same reason why they think that, you can like we said last week, you can fucking negotiate your salary with on the same level as a multi-billion-dollar corporation, or you're on the same footing financially as a fucking billionaire. The same way that there's no difference between you or Donald Trump. You should be able to negotiate your prices and your salaries and your home loans and all that shit with the same equal footing, because each person is an island, each person is responsible solely for themselves, and all of that shit. And so how come a 15-year-old girl isn't responsible for her own decision making when it comes to banging a 40-year-old guy? It's like their philosophy doesn't have the room to consider how incorrect, wrong, vile, disgusting, and how that actually is, and how people use this sort of philosophy to exploit other people. It doesn't. It's like their philosophy limits their thought in this respect, right? I'm going about this all wrong. I'm trying to put in little details when what we should be doing is putting in big blotches of color like this. This is what we should be doing, and then going through and refining it afterwards. So let's do that. Anyway, here's another guy. I want to open this one for you guys. This guy's name is Cecil Incy. And please forgive the amount of ads on this particular advertisement, this particular page. Let me put this down in the chat for you guys too, if you want to follow along. Hey, Raph, how you doing? Personer, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining. Lewis the Hedgehog, great to see you as always. Thanks, guys. We will read your comments here in about 10 minutes. I'm almost through all my prepared material. Anyway, this guy, Cecil Incy, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but he basically compared statutory rape to a property rights violation. He ran for the Greene County Commission District number 2 in Missouri as the Libertarian candidate. Resigns after Greene County Commission candidate removed from state panel, resigns from Libertarian Party after comments about underage sex. So this guy basically, he's got that pedo smile going. He essentially echoes all of the same comments of the most vile of shit posters on 4chan does, A man running for Greene County Commission District 2 has been removed from a state advisory board and resigned from the state Libertarian Party after comments he made about children under 18 having sex with adults, including the statement, "You can't rape the willing, LOL." So, went on to say, parents should protect and preserve their child's right to liberty, that all that consent should derive from the parent on all issues of the child. A child's parents should deny the child's right to sex. So you see, it's the same stance that Murray Rothbard had, the same stance that Ron Paul had, that parents own their children, So this guy is one of the more vile ones that I saw here, Another comment from him, is it molestation if the 13-year-old consented? So yeah, that's another guy. You guys, I encourage you to read up on that dude. He was a piece of fucking garbage. And I have one more guy here that I want to bring to your attention. Let me see here. Let me just cue this up correctly. Blah, blah, blah. Give me a second here. This guy's name is, what is his name? Nathan Daniel Larson. Right, here's what Nathan Daniel Larson looks like. He's also got that pedo smile. I mean, this guy looks like he's a dude that you would see in a fucking white van with the words "free candy" written on the side. And he ran as the, let me go back to my notes here, sorry. He is a frequent candidate in Virginia on the Libertarian ticket. He ran for Congress in 2008 and 2018. He also ran for like the Virginia State's House in 2017 as well. And this guy is an avowed pedophile, white supremacist. He's made comments about curtailing women's rights, decriminalizing child sexual abuse and incest. He was actually expelled from the Libertarian Party in 2017. So there is some force, they are kind of fighting back a little bit against these people. But, to say that the Libertarian, movement in general doesn't have a problem with pedophilia is, that's just not true, because they fucking do. Right? This particular guy here, Nathan Larson, went to prison in 2008 for threatening the president, threatening Obama, basically. You're not allowed to threaten the president. You go to jail for that shit. So went to prison then, and he was also arrested in Denver, at the Denver airport last year for kidnapping a 12-year-old girl. Basically went online and chatted up a 12-year-old girl and convinced her to run away with him in order to, have sex with her. Kind of fucking, what's that TV show? Right? What's that TV show with the guy that catches, child sex, pedophiles and sex offenders? Kind of like that, So yeah, and this dude, self-avowed libertarian, ran on the Libertarian ticket. for, in defense of the Libertarian Party, they did kick him out, but it's like, well, how come so many of these fucking people keep showing up and running for office as libertarians? Why is that? How come so many of these people are fucking attracted to libertarianism, right? And I guess it's only really been in recent years that they've started to kick people out, right? I found another article here. God, did I write it down? There was an article of a woman who, damn, I don't have it. I found an article of basically a whistleblower in the Libertarian Party in Colorado who was basically exposing pro-pedophile people within the leadership of the party, and she got kicked out. And damn it, I wish I would have wrote that down. I'll find that and I'll put it in the thingamajigger afterwards. So yeah, you know, it really does. I really think it really does come from just the intellectual bankruptcy of libertarian thought. The unwillingness to accept that there are some situations where a state does have um, probably the right, or people rather, put it another way, coercion is needed in order to ensure the rights and well-beings of certain segments of the society, and they don't want to acknowledge that. And when it comes to the rights of children, that's one of those areas where I think we all agree that that there should be some coercion. The state should be allowed to, for example, take away your kids if you're not treating them right, if you're abusing them, if you're trying to exploit them sexually, if you're not feeding them, shit like that, if you're making them work instead of go to fucking school, that kind of thing, right? I think, the majority of people in the country, in fact, probably over the entire world, will agree. It's like, because in real life, there are parents who just don't give a shit about their kids. There are parents who exploit their children, you know, um, in many ways, including sexually. You hear about weird, messed up news stories like that all the time, where like somebody sells their kid into prostitution, shit like that, or where a parent will keep a kid in a dog crate and only feed them fucking chicken bones and like and fucking pork feet and chicken bones and crusts of bread and shit to keep them alive and whatever, right? And that's what happens. That's what happens in a society where parents own their children. If you own your kid, if you own another human being, that's like essentially slavery. That means you could do whatever the hell you want with them, and it shouldn't be like that. And this is like, but that's the logical conclusion of libertarianism, right? Because it all extends, it's all an extension of I don't want to pay taxes. So I don't want to pay taxes. Here are the bullshit reasons why. And in order to be consistent with these bullshit reasons, I have to make up all this other shit about the age of consent and kids and stuff, or else it all breaks down. It all breaks down, and then I'm forced to admit that that I should be paying taxes. That's really what it all comes down to, and it's complete horseshit of the highest order. And it's why I hate. That's why I'm not a libertarian. That's why I hate. I think libertarians suck. I think they're fucking. I think it's all bullshit. And that's why I'm making this video, because fuck these people. So, anyway, that's all my prepared material. Let's To Catch a Predator. Thank you, Personer. That's the name of the show, To Catch a Predator. So, Chris Hansen. Yes, Lusa Hedgehog. Chris Hansen on To Catch a Predator. So let's read some of the comments from you guys here. Thank you for sticking through it with me on 2 videos about libertarians. I know we kind of talked about these people last week, but it's a very large subject. There's a lot to say, and I don't know if I probably next week will not do a video on them, since we already did 2, but at some point I do want to kind of come back and talk about more bullshit libertarianism stuff when it comes to, especially when it comes to things like police protection, the way that Like, for example, maybe this will be more of a anarcho-capitalist thing, because most libertarians will agree that we need policing to some extent. They just disagree about what police should be, capable of doing. Whereas the like a anarcho-capitalist thing will be like, well, there should be no police because there's no state at all, and then you should have to like sign on to a voluntary kind of, you know, private security firm or whatever. I do want to make a video about that eventually, but I don't know about, maybe we'll see we'll see what's happening in the world next week, you know. Um, but that will probably be coming soon. Most likely, my next video on this subject will be about, that type of like private security firms, private fire protection, just the anarcho-capitalist and libertarian predilection to privatize basic services that should be available to everybody equally. That's most likely what my next video on these will be about. Let's read some of the comments though. So, yeah, Persummer, Mr. Persummer. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but my let's see. My understanding is that the age of consent is often restricted by age ranges. It's legal in Japan for a 13-year-old to sleep with another 13-year-old, but not a 20-year-old. Is that what that is? Oh, okay. So, yeah, that seemed a little weird to me when I was reading about that. It just said, the website I went to just said age of consent Japan 13. And I was like, fuck, 13? Seriously? Like, I do remember reading something at some point about how in Japan, um, older men will pay underage girls to basically be their girlfriends. And I remember reading something about that, and I don't know if that includes sexual stuff as also, but that seems a little funky to me. I don't know. I didn't see anything on that when researching for this video because that's not really what this video is about. But I'll have to read some more about that. That's kind of because you would think Japan, like Japan's like a first world developed country. Like like you would think, oh yeah, Thailand. That sounds like that sounds more plausible for something like Thailand or Cambodia, not so much Japan. So I don't know. I have to read more about that. Let's see. Dynacat loves me. The more conservative the country historically, the lower the age of consent. Um, in those countries, you need to look at the age of legal marriage. Then that's an effective age of consent. Of course, those countries often have arranged marriages as well, so consent really doesn't even enter into it. That's true. Yeah, a lot of those places where we mentioned that, you know, it's illegal to even have premarital sex. That's definitely true. A lot of those places, like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, whatever, um, they have arranged marriages. That's exactly right. So they don't even really, but some of those places also have really weird laws when it comes to things like rape. Like you can, a man rapes a woman, he'll get away with it if he then marries her. So I remember reading a thing about that too. Like, and that's even some places in Eastern Europe have laws like that as well. So it's sort of a backdoor way of forcing a woman to marry you against her consent. You just go rape her, and then you offer to marry her, and then basically law says fucking she has to, you know? So, and that's the way the man gets away with raping her, and because also in these countries, if you rape somebody, you usually get the death penalty. That's another thing. Well, the women will get punished, right? I don't know if the man, maybe the man gets a death penalty depending if she can, if I know, like for example, in Iran, you have to have in a rape trial, there has to be two male witnesses that attest to the rape. You know, it's not enough that the woman says, "Hey, I was raped." She has to have two male people, two male witnesses come up and be like, "Yeah, we saw it," or we heard about it, or whatever. And that's kind of backwards as fuck too, because then what ends up happening is if she doesn't have that, then she ends up getting punished for being raped. It's all fucked up. This is why theocracies don't work, right? Because theocracies are based on religions that formed organically hundreds, if not thousands of years ago and have just no basis in, should have no basis in fucking modern, like the modern world. Because it's like morality that's just all fucked up. Um, let's see. Inshoma. Hey, buddy. Cannot stick around today, but I do love these streams, and I hope to see you soon beyond the veil of the computer screen. Yeah, cool. Thanks for dropping in, Inshoma. Appreciate it. Lusa Hedgehog. Pray away the gay because that works so well for the clergy. Oh, talking about Milo Yiannopoulos. Yeah, yeah. Those things are bullshit. You know, I guess the one thing, because that's the thing, is that you'll see like people forcing their kids to go to those things, those sort of anti-gay conversion camps and stuff, and it's horseshit. But then you hear stories about them, like you'll see people talking about them on Reddit or YouTube or something, and it's like they all know it's a farce, and the people that actually go to them like end up having sex with the counselors and shit like that. Like, so it's like, yeah, it's all bullshit, and they know it's bullshit, and it's sort of like maybe there's some psychological damage going on for the children. That's why it still shouldn't be allowed, in my opinion. It's still baloney, but it doesn't actually seem to be like converting any gay people into not being gay anymore. Like they for sure don't have a very good track record, and it seems to me like those sorts of camps, those sorts of anti-gay conversion camps, it's just another form of grift, that Christians, the one thing Christians are really good at is ripping each other off in the name of God. And this is just another method, you know? So, I don't know. I still think they should be illegal, though, you know? Um, Dynacat loves me. I am at a loss to reconcile torture and libertarianism. Yeah, you would think the one thing that libertarians could all be against, besides war, which, maybe that might be a good subject for a stream on libertarians too, the libertarian stance on war, because it's not all cut and dry. There are very much pro-war libertarians. Maybe we should talk about them. But you would think that one thing they would all be in agreement with is that torturing people is bad, you know. Now, I could see, because it could conceivably fit within libertarian thought, that it would be okay for a private entity to torture somebody, like a private police force to torture somebody. Um, the reason you would give for that would be because it's on a lower scale. That's an argument I hear often a lot from libertarians too. Like they'll often say that it's okay for a private entity or even just a state government to engage in things that the federal government should not be doing because the amount of people is lower, so the actual harm to real people is lower, and that's the only reason why. So for example, it's okay for a state to outlaw abortion because it's not as affecting as many people as a federal law against it, which is just not ideologically consistent at all, and it just really illustrates the fact that it's all just it's like I said this last week as well. It's all culture. It's not really ideology with these people, right? That's too small. Let's make that 5. You know, it has really very little to do with ideology and a lot to do with culture. And their culture says, they're against abortion, so they have to come up with bullshit ways to be against abortion, but also still support their other horseshit ideas about the, non-aggression principle and shit like that. You know what I mean? That's really what it is. It's like, that's why it's so easy to poke holes in this sort of philosophy, because it's not very well thought out. you know. Um, let's see. Inshoma, let the sexiest. Wait, what? Oh, let the sexless, super intelligent space aliens invade this planet already because they can't do any worse. Sexless aliens? I'd rather have the sexy aliens myself, you know. But let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog, as I said before, what good is your ideology if it can't survive without constantly rejecting new information? Yep. exactly. That's, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess maybe this is low-hanging fruit. It's easy to pick on these people, but you know, the thing is that they're just so fucking vocal, and it's like their shit seems to be spreading, you know? Like you're starting to you see mainstream politicians into this shit. Rand Paul, you know, fucking other God, what was that asshole that ran for vice president with McCain? No, not McCain. Not John. It was not McCain. Um, the fuck is that guy's name? God, I can't remember his name now. That young swarmy suck up little bastard that ran against Obama. What was let's see, vice president candidate candidates. God damn it. No, not unsuccessful major party. Who ran for president in 2008? No, not Sarah Palin. It was who was the person before Sarah Palin that lost to Obama? Shit. These are the primary ones. I can't remember. No, these are the Democrat. These are the list of female ones. Fuck, I can't remember his name. It was a Republican guy that yes, Paul Ryan. That was it. Thank you, Lisa Hedgehog. Thank you so much, Paul Ryan. Yeah, that guy, for example, um, said that his one of his favorite books was, you know, Atlas Shrugged, for example, right? That was the point I was trying to make before I completely forgot Paul Ryan's name. Thank you so much. The point I was trying to make is that you're starting to see, you know, a prevalence of this sort of libertarian, objectivist, anarcho-capitalist thought, like starting to invade, you know, the mainstream, you know, because it seemed like for years and years and years, these people were always just sort of in the background, but they were essentially fringe candidates. They were essentially a joke that the mainstream people made fun of. Not so much anymore, you know. Um, 30 years of Fox News and radicalizing the right wing in this country has kind of like pushed these people to the forefront to where even sometimes they seem a little sane when it comes to mainstream Republicans. You know, the libertarians at least are for the most part anti-war. They're for the most part pro-abortion. They're for the most part, you know, they would not support, for example, overthrowing the United States government, you know, or restricting people's voting rights conceivably, although in real life many of them do. And this is the scary fucking thing. It's like, you know, so their shit is becoming like more and more mainstream with every election cycle, you know? And it's not the danger of the libertarian candidate running and winning the presidency. That's probably never going to happen. It's more of their ideals being adopted by more and more adopted by mainstream conservatives. You know, that's where I think the danger actually lies. You know, so we may actually see policies one day based on this horse shit. Right? So that's why we should talk about it, you know. And also, and I've been kind of leading up to this for a few months now, they are also very much the intellectual backbone for the alt-right. So that's kind of where all these streams are leading. All these streams are leading to a series of streams of the exploration of the alt-right. So we're getting to it. So that's why I talked about, for example, the KKK. That's why I talked about Christian identity and the you know, the militia movement and all of these racist movements and all that stuff, because I'm leading up to a series of streams on the alt-right. You know, I want to go through all this stuff. I want to go through everything, you know, the Richard Spencer people and even stuff like Gamergate and shit like that. I want to kind of explore all these things because that's the world we're living in nowadays, right, folks? You know, you ignore this stuff at your peril, right? It's all ridiculous and stupid to us. In 20 years, maybe not so much. And that's why I think we should really not ignore these people. So anyway, so we're hitting the 2 hour mark. Here's where we're at right now. Looking pretty good. Starting to put some texture. into the grass here. Added a little bit of flames. I think I need to make some effects here because there would be light coming out of that, right? Maybe we'll, once we're done putting texture in the grass here and clean up, we'll have to put shadows on stuff. So maybe have 2 or maybe 3 streams left with this particular piece, making a lot of progress. I think it looks good. Anyway, it is about that time for us to say goodbye, Thank you all so much again for all coming and all that stuff. I, of course, have to do my ending speech here. So, like and subscribe and all of that. As always, share my videos with your friends, that kind of thing. Really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you all for coming, Let me just open up all my stuff. Damn it. Sorry, I'm having some problems with my keyboard here. That's kind of weird. Give me 1 second here, folks. So, of course, thanks to you all. Thank you guys all for coming. And if you want to see more of me, if you like my artwork, you can see more of my artwork here at hawanja.com, or on my DeviantArt site here. This is where all my artwork goes. So you can see these are all the pieces that we did in the stream and stuff like that. They're all here. So if you want to see more of my artwork, please check me out there. If you want to, also I have a webcomic. You can see my webcomic at hawanja.com. Fun for the whole stupid family. It's got ninjas and demons and people sword fighting and doing, karate and shit like that. My comics are very violent. Please check me out there. If you like what I do and you want to support me, you can check out my SD shop. So I sell mainly prints and things like that. I'll be putting up some stuff, some little sculptures and parasites and things for Halloween. So I sell, these are all handmade prints, that each one comes out a little unique. This is like a Lovecraft character right here. These are 11 by 17. Each one comes out different. There are no digital alterations to this image. This is all done with like coffee and other coffee grounds and stuff like that. They all come out different. So if you like me, if you like what I do and you want to support me monetarily, feel free to check out my SD shop here. I also have a Patreon if you want to support me every month. I actually do have a couple of patrons now, which is awesome. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. You can see me there. And I also have a alternate YouTube channel where I talk about toys and video games and movies, TV shows. Been doing a lot of stuff on Masters of the Universe Origins because these are the best toys ever. And also my latest one is, this Godzilla reaction figure from Super 7. It's kind of awesome. So yeah, if you want to see me talk about toys and games and cartoons and other silly stuff, non-political stuff, you can check me out on UCD videos. So once again, guys, thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog. Great to see you as always. Thank you, Adversary Fandom 2. You're cool. You're the best. Brainbug. Great to see you again. Personmer, I think. Is that how you pronounce that? Thanks for coming, man. Really appreciate that. Dynacat loves me. You're awesome. And Shoma, you are also awesome as hell. You guys are the best. And I hope to see you all next week at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thanks a lot, guys. Adios.